Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Sagnick Dutta. I'm a second professional MBBS student at Burdwan Medical College and Hospital, West Bengal. In this video, we're gonna continue with our topic of discussion, that is breathing and exchange of gases, which is basically the first chapter of human physiology of the NCERT Class 11 Biology book. Now in this video particularly we'll be discussing about these four topics. The rest of the other topics we have already discussed in our previous video. Now in this video we'll be talking about the exchange of gases, how the different exchange of gases occur between alveoli and blood and the tissue and blood as well. Secondly, we will talk about the transport of gases, how are various gases transported from one point in the body to another. Thirdly, we'll be talking about the regulation of respiration, just like we talked about the regulation of the cardiovascular system in our previous videos. And finally, we will be talking about the disorders related to the respiratory system. So without much ado, let us just start with this video. Now, when we talk about the exchange of gases, the primary site, the first and foremost site of the exchange of gas is the alveoli. When I was discussing the structure of the lungs, I said this information as well, that alveoli are the places where the gaseous exchange first takes place. So if this is an alveoli and these are the blood vessels, so gases exchange take place from the alveoli to the blood and from blood to alveoli as well. The second place where the exchange of gases occur is between the blood and the tissues. Now, oxygen and carbon dioxide are the main two gases which are exchanged in these sites by the process of diffusion. And if you have the idea of diffusion, if you have gone through the different chapters previously, then you might know that diffusion is something which depends on the pressure. Gases move from high pressure areas to low pressure areas. Apart from pressure differences, the solubility of the gases as well as the thickness of the membrane through which the gases pass also matter a lot during the exchange of these gases. Thus, if we really need to summarize what are the different factors influencing the exchange of gases, these are: number one, the pressure differences. Second is the solubility of gases, and third is the thickness of membranes. Right. Now, pressure contributed by an individual gas is known as the partial pressure. Like, if, for example, this is a container and it has got various gases like oxygen, carbon dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, etc. If we need to measure the pressure contributed by oxygen, this is said to be the partial pressure of oxygen and is represented as PO2. Similarly, for carbon dioxide, we'll be representing it as PCO2, and for NO2, we'll be representing it as PNO2. Now, it is this partial pressure which determines the transfusion and the exchange of that particular gas. What I mean is, the partial pressure of oxygen would be responsible for the exchange of oxygen between various parts of the body. Now, there is a standard partial pressure, or more or less this pressure is maintained in different parts of the body of these two gases, that is oxygen and carbon dioxide. This is a table given in the NCERT which actually depicts the partial pressures of oxygen and carbon dioxide at different parts of the body. I would like to draw the same table here as well. For oxygen and carbon dioxide, the atmospheric air pressure for oxygen is about 159, because we know the concentration of oxygen in the atmosphere is higher than that of carbon dioxide. As compared to oxygen, carbon dioxide has a pressure of 0.3. In the alveoli, it is 104 and 40. For deoxygenated blood, it is 40 and 45. For oxygenated blood, it is 95 and 40. And in the tissues, there is 40 and 45. Now, from this table, it is very much clear that the gradient of the oxygen gas is from the atmosphere towards the alveoli and from the blood towards the tissues. And that is how nature has actually created it. The tissues are in a need of oxygen, and that is have a lower pressure than the blood. And from the blood, the oxygen gets transferred to the tissues, and hence the oxygenated blood has got a higher pressure than that of the tissues. Similarly, if we see for carbon dioxide, because we need to actually excrete out carbon dioxide, its pressure is lower in the atmosphere as compared to the alveoli. Similarly, it is the case in between the deoxygenated blood and the tissues. As we talked about these factors contributing to the exchange of gases, if we talk about the pressure differences, it is very clear from this table. Now, what about solubility? The solubility of these two gases are also different, and that is why the exchange of these gases are also different. The solubility of carbon dioxide, if I say it to be SCO2, it is about 20 to 25 times higher than that of oxygen. The amount of CO2 that can diffuse through the diffusion membrane per unit difference in partial pressure is much higher as compared to that of the oxygen. For example, this is the membrane difference which needs to be crossed by both the gases. Suppose there are 4 molecules of oxygen and 4 molecules of carbon dioxide. And in this side, there are 2 molecules of oxygen and 2 molecules of carbon dioxide. We can clearly see that the oxygen and carbon dioxide concentration are equally more in this side of the membrane than this side of the membrane. So, as the nature of law, both oxygen and carbon dioxide shall diffuse to the other side. But because the solubility of carbon dioxide is more than that of oxygen, it might happen that all the 4 molecules of carbon dioxide pass, whereas maybe only a single molecule of oxygen diffuse out. We talk about the diffusion membrane at the alveolar level. There are 3 major layers. That is, just now I draw a picture. If this is an alveoli and this is the blood vessel, then this is the first layer, which is made up of squamous epithelium of the alveoli. Second would be the endothelium of the blood capillary. This is the endothelium. And third is the basement membrane, which is present in between these two. Now, if we talk about the basement membrane, it's just a single layer of cells present between the squamous epithelium of the alveoli and the endothelium of the capillaries. The total thickness of these 3 membranes together is much less than a millimeter. If we just analyze all these factors, whatever it might be it the pressure differences, be it the solubility differences, or be it the thickness of the membrane, all favor for the diffusion of the oxygen from the alveoli to the tissues, whereas the carbon dioxide is diffused from the tissues to the alveoli. Right. Now, once we have discussed about the factors affecting the exchange of gases, let us now discuss about the transport of gases. Now, if we talk about the transport of gases, basically blood is the only medium of transport for both oxygen and carbon dioxide. But as we have read earlier, the composition of blood, it has got some formed elements as well as plasma. These two gases are transported via various mediums in the blood. For oxygen, 97% of oxygen is transported via RBCs, whereas the remaining 3% is transported in a dissolved state through the plasma. In case of CO2, the case is a little different. About 20 to 25% of the CO2 are transported via RBCs. 70% are carried as bicarbonate ions, and 7% of carbon dioxide is transported in a dissolved state through the plasma. Now, these are the basic difference in the transport mediums of oxygen and carbon dioxide. Now, let us just talk about the individual transportations of these gases. First and foremost, we shall talk about the transport of oxygen. Oxygen is mostly carried by the RBCs with the help of a pigment called as hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is red in color and it contains iron, and hence is an iron containing pigment. Now, oxygen binds with hemoglobin to form a complex called as oxyhemoglobin. Now, each hemoglobin molecules carry about 4 molecules of oxygen. Now, this binding of oxygen with the hemoglobin to form this oxyhemoglobin compound is a temporary structure, and this depends on the partial pressure difference of the oxygens. For instance, in the alveoli, the partial pressure of oxygen is higher than that of carbon dioxide, and hence the oxygen is attached to the hemoglobin more than that of the carbon dioxide. Right. Now, if we talk about the transport of oxygen, it mainly depends on 3 factors. First, the pressure of oxygen, that is PO2. Secondly, it depends on the H plus ion concentrations. And third is the temperature. Now, to depict the factors affecting oxygen transportation, we derive a sigmoid curve when the percentage saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen is plotted against the partial pressure of oxygen. In the x-axis, we take the partial pressure of oxygen, and in the y-axis, we take the hemoglobin saturation, and we get a sigmoid curve. Right. Now, this curve is known as the oxygen dissociation curve and is highly useful in studying these factors affecting the oxygen transportation. Now, let us just look at this curve carefully. We can see that as the partial pressure of oxygen increases, the hemoglobin saturation also increases of oxygen. Right. So it is very clear that if we have a higher PO2, then hemoglobin attachment with the oxygen increases, and that is what happens in the alveoli. In the alveoli, the PO2 is higher than that of the PCO2, and as a result, in the alveoli, oxygen attaches to the hemoglobin, not the CO2. Apart from these, if we have lesser H plus concentration, that is, the condition is alkaline, H plus concentration is directly proportional to acidity, right? Directly proportional to acidity. If the H plus concentration is less, that means we have a higher pH, and once we have a higher pH, the condition is said to be alkaline. An alkaline pH favors the formation of oxyhemoglobin. Moreover, if there is lower temperature, it also favors the formation of oxyhemoglobin. All these conditions are very much present in the lung surface, that is near the alveoli. That is, the PO2 is more than that of CO2. The H plus concentration is lower, that is, the condition is a little alkaline, and moreover the temperature is lowered in the lung surface. As a result, in the alveoli, the oxyhemoglobin is formed. And this is the exact case which is opposite in the tissues. And as a result, in the tissues, carbaminohemoglobin, that is HbCO2, which is known as carbaminohemoglobin, is formed in the tissues. Because in the tissues, we have the PCO2 more than that of the PO2. The H plus concentrations are higher, that is, the pH is lower, and we have an acidic condition. Moreover, in the tissues, we have a little higher temperature. All these favors the formation of HbCO2, that is known as carbaminohemoglobin. Every 100 milliliter of oxygenated blood can deliver about 5 ml of oxygen to the tissues. If the physiology of the individual is normal, that is, under normal physiological conditions, 100 ml of oxygenated blood transports about 5 ml of oxygen to the tissues. As we talked about earlier, that oxygen, 97% of it is transported through the RBCs. When transported through RBCs, it is transported in the form of oxyhemoglobin, that is HbO2, and these are the factors which affect the transportation. And in case of CO2, when transported through the RBCs in the form of carbaminohemoglobin, these are the same factors which determine the transportation of carbon dioxide. But as we saw earlier, that the transportation of carbon dioxide through the RBCs is only about 20 to 25%, whereas that in case of bicarbonate ion, or in the form of bicarbonate ion, is the majority, that is 70% of it is transported in the form of bicarbonate ions. Now, how is this, that is carbon dioxide, transported in the form of bicarbonate ions? The RBCs, the red blood cells, they contain a specific enzyme called as the carbonic anhydrase. This enzyme actually favors the transportation of carbon dioxide in the form of bicarbonate ions. Now, this carbonic anhydrase enzyme, apart from RBCs, are present in minute quantities in the plasma as well. How this helps is, for example, we have CO2 and we have water in the surrounding tissues and in the plasma as well. These, in the presence of carbonic anhydrase, is converted to H2CO3, which is then broken down in the presence of carbonic anhydrase yet over again to form bicarbonate ions and H+. At the tissue, where the partial pressure of CO2 is high due to catabolism mechanisms that occur in the tissues, the CO2 diffuses into the blood, that is RBCs and plasma, and forms these bicarbonate ions. Now, as a bicarbonate ion, it is transported till the alveoli. Now, if you see this reaction that I wrote right here, you might see that the arrows are equivalent signs. That is, this reaction occurred in both directions. With the help of these carbonic anhydrase enzymes yet over again, near the alveoli, the bicarbonate is again converted to carbon dioxide and is thrown away on the basis of pressure differences. This is how the reaction proceeds in the opposite direction, that is from the tissues to the alveoli, and is carbon dioxide is released out of the body. Now, as I said, in case of oxygen, that every 100 milliliter of oxygen transports about 5 ml of oxygen to the tissues. That is, you might remember this data, that this is 100 ml of oxygenated blood. Similarly, 100 ml of deoxygenated blood, this transports around 4 ml of carbon dioxide to the alveoli. I hope I have made myself clear till this point. Thus, if I need to summarize, transport of oxygen is mainly dependent on the pressure of oxygen, the solubility of oxygen, third is the pH, and fourth is temperature at the place. For carbon dioxide, all these factors matter. Apart from these factors, the presence of carbonic anhydrase also regulates the carbon dioxide transportation. Let us move to our next topic of discussion, that is the regulation of respiration. Let us discuss about the regulation of respiration. The main regulatory center in the body for respiration is the medulla oblongata in the brain. The medulla oblongata has a defined specific center for the regulation of respiration known as the respiratory rhythm center. Now, if we talk about the respiratory rhythm center, it is the first and primarily responsible center for the regulation of respiration. All other centers in the body command to this respiratory rhythm center, and finally the respiratory rhythm center is responsible for the differentiation and controlling of the respiration. Now, there is another center known as the pneumotaxic center, which is present in the pons region of the brain. Now, how this pneumotaxic center works is it reports to the respiratory rhythm center, and as a result there is a decrease in the duration of inspiration, and as a result there is altered respiratory rate. Now you understand it properly. Now, for example, this pneumotaxic center is activated and the duration of inspiration is decreased. That is, we are inspiring very fast, right? And that actually increases the respiratory rate. Apart from these, there are some chemosensitive areas which are present adjacent to this respiratory rhythm center. These are highly sensitive to the carbon dioxide and H+ ions. As a result, there is controlation of the respiration based on these two ions and elements. Now, if for some reason the carbon dioxide and H+ concentration increases, these chemosensitive areas get activated. As a result, they send the signals to the respiratory rhythm center, which in turn controls the rate of respiration. Now, in the body, there is a presence of the aortic arch. Aortic arch is nothing but, if we talk about the heart, when the aorta comes out of the heart, there is a formation of this arch. This is known as the aortic arch. The aortic arch and the carotid artery in the body, they have certain centers which can recognize the difference in concentration of these substances, that is carbon dioxide and H plus concentration. They again send the signals to the respiratory rhythm center, which in turn controls the respiration as a whole. Thus, from this discussion, we are very clear that the main regulatory center is nothing but the respiratory rhythm center. Every other center reports to the respiratory rhythm center, which in turn moderates the respiration with its own respiratory control mechanisms. Once we have known about the regulation of the respiration, we should talk about the disorders related to the respiratory system. The disorders related to the respiratory systems are many, but the main important ones which we should talk about are, the first one is asthma. In a country like India, asthma is very common because asthma is a condition associated with difficulty in breathing which causes wheezing, and the cause of asthma is the inflammation of bronchi and bronchioles. And this inflammation actually occurs due to foreign particles like pollutants. And as pollution is so high and is on the rise in India, asthma is very much common these days in India. Secondly, emphysema. This disease is mostly seen in people who smoke cigarettes. This is a chronic disorder. Chronic disorder means it's a long-standing disorder. If someone smokes a cigarette for a single period of time, he or she might not suffer from emphysema. But if he or she is smoking cigarette for years and years, he will be diagnosed with emphysema at certain point in their lives. This emphysema is characterized by damaged alveolar walls. And as we know that alveolar walls are the main respiratory site. So if the alveolar walls are damaged, the respiratory surface is decreased. As a result, they have difficulty in respiration and breathing. And third is there are some respiratory disorders associated with occupations, and these are known as occupational respiratory disorders, that is ORD. In industries like wood industry, carpentry industry, in asbestos industry, in silicon industries, these respiratory disorders are much seen. They may suffer from diseases called as asbestosis. They must suffer from silicosis. And all these are characterized by the fibrosis of the lungs. Fibrosis means there is proliferation of fibrous tissues. And as we can understand from the name, that fibrous tissues are unstretchable. Fibrous, it is made up of fibers. And as a result, the lung cannot expand properly, causing difficulty in breathing. And these foreign bodies cannot be defended by the defense mechanism of the body fully, and as a result these occupational respiratory disorders occur. So it is very much recommended that workers who work in these industries, they wear protective masks and have proper equipments before they start working in this industry to prevent these type of diseases. With this, we come to an end of discussion with this chapter called as breathing and exchange of gases. If you do like this video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and please share this video with your friends who might need them as well. Thank you. Keep studying. Stay well.